A jury returned a mixed verdict yesterday in Memphis in the case of 3 former police officers accused in the brutal killing last year of Tyree Nichols. He was a 29-year-old black man who was beaten, punched, and kicked by 5 police officers after what was a routine traffic stop. Justice correspondent Jamal Andrews joins us now with more on the outcome of this federal trial. Jamal, I remember the body cam footage when this came out. It was horrific to watch. These officers were convicted on some of the charges. They were acquitted on others. A lot of people are not satisfied with this. What can you tell us about how the jury reached this verdict?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned, Chris, an extraordinarily horrific scene, one that I think thrusts police reform back into the national conversation in a way that we hadn't necessarily seen it since the death of George Floyd. But that body camera video you mentioned showed these officers giving what was described in court as a run tax or a street tax, and again led to beatings of Tyree Nichols just steps away from his mother's home. At one point, he calls for his mother in that body cam video. But as far as this jury and these verdicts are concerned, not a clean sweep like we saw with the federal charges in the George Floyd case. There was a very mixed verdict. The jury went and deliberated for about 6 hours here. And then ultimately came back with, again, a mixed verdict. This, of course, coming after 2 of the officers pleaded guilty ahead of this trial. I want to show you a breakdown of the charges because, again, it is a bit in the weeds here. Here are how the verdicts played out. First of all, you had 2 officers, Desmond Mills and Emmett Martin, who pled guilty to conspiracy to witness tamper and excessive force and failing to intervene. That happened months ago, but the other 3 officers did go to trial. That's Darius Bean, Demetrius Haley, and Justin Smith. They were all convicted of witness tampering, which is probably the least serious charge of the group. Now, Haley was convicted of violating Nichols' civil rights, causing bodily injury. The more serious charge was violating civil rights, causing death. And none of the officers that went to trial were convicted on that charge, which, again, is the one that carried life and probably the most serious charge that all of these officers were facing. And as you mentioned, I think there are people who are dissatisfied with what we've seen here, but there are still state charges on the way. And Ben Crump, the attorney representing the Nichols family, expressed a different tone after this verdict. Listen.
Very important that the jury found all of them in some way participated in a crime and that Tyree Nichols' death won't go unaccounted for. That is critical. 3 of them have been found guilty of charges, and they all, as the judge articulated, have been taken into custody.
Now, you talk about the amount of charges that they are facing. This is just one of 2 big trials that they have. You have that state trial that is not necessarily, they haven't picked a date for that trial, but they face second-degree murder charges in that state case. And again, these sort of links that prosecutors have to go to get a guilty verdict in a second-degree murder charge in state court is very different than what they were facing in this federal court trial. The sentencing for this case is coming on January 22nd, but on Monday, there's going to be a hearing to decide whether these 3 officers have to serve the time in between now and that sentencing behind bars, or if they can do it at home. Many expect Mills and Martin to plead guilty in those state charges as well. We don't know if that's going to be to a lesser charge or to that second-degree murder charge. And again, that sentencing taking place on January 22nd. I want to play you a little bit from Rodney Wells, which is Tyree Nichols' stepfather, and he expressed a similar sentiment to what we heard from Ben Crump. Listen.
I just want to say for the family that we are all elated. We're all very, very happy that these guys have been put in jail. This is a long time coming. Yes. And justice for Tyree. So we're just so very proud that all of them are going to jail today.
And one more wrinkle I want to mention here. When you talk about federal cases, if you are convicted on federal charges, there is no parole option. So if you are given 20 years, you serve that full 20 years. And so that is another thing to consider, is that even with state charges, depending on what they end up getting, if they are convicted, you could have a situation where they come up for parole and they're let off early. In federal court, that is not an option, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the moment, too, in that body cam, Jamal, that I'll always remember is when he calls out for his mother. It was just chilling. This story certainly not over yet. Justice correspondent Jamal Andrews for us live in Texas. Jamal, thanks.